Hello everyone, my name is Wet Wasabi, and as you can see, I have a lot of time in Amazon's new game, New World. As a player with nearly 500 hours, I just wanted to cover whether or not I think the game is worth it, your time, your money, and its current state. I'd like to start off by talking about the grind to level 60, which is the max level in this game. It takes a very long time. I think it took me about 100 hours just to hit max level, which coming from a game like ESO, it felt ridiculously long. Now, to more seasoned MMO players, I could see this 100-hour grind not being as bad as what most people are used to, but the quests, especially in the early game, feel all the same. Um, about 80% of the quests, maybe even 90% of the quests in the game are just kill X amount of enemies, loot this container however many times, and kill this specific enemy. Those are the main quests that you will be doing all the way up to level 60. There are different methods to gaining XP as well. It's not just quest. There's a system called town boards. You can grind mobs, even though it's very inefficient in this game. However, the town board is probably the fastest way to level up and get your XP. So in every major settlement, there's a town board. These give quests such as collect this material and return it to this location, go to this area, loot this chest, obtain this item. It's essentially the same as your basic story quest, but it contributes to the entire server as town boards are projects assigned by the governing company of an area. And by players completing this quest, it'll upgrade certain aspects of the town, such as the tannery or the sewing station, things like that. At times, it feels like some of these town board quests give much more XP than they should, such as gather 200 hemp. And this is a very easy task to complete, especially when you're in the early game areas. It's a tier 1 material, and it'll probably reward somewhere around 1,000 XP, which is probably on the high end of the spectrum talking about XP, especially when it comes to side quests, as they don't give that much in this game. Personally, I'm a fan of the town board system. I find it creates a good way to get the community working together towards a similar goal. However, I like it as an option. A lot of the times it'll feel required almost to do your town boards because you'll get to an area, say my one friend was doing a level 52 quest where he had to collect different flowers from different areas. And a majority of these areas he had to go to were level 60. And as a level 52 player, these mobs will just one-shot you, and you have to kind of find ways to maneuver around them without pulling aggro and just getting one-shot. Another thing I dislike about progression and trying to play with friends is there's certain story exclusive quests that if your friend's a higher level or they're not on that exact quest, they cannot help you. So there's this enemy, I believe it's called Well Guardian, and it's essentially a raid boss. Like you need a group of 5, maybe even 10 to take it down, but only players with that quest can get into that area to fight that boss. So it makes it hard, especially like if you're on a server where there's not as much people and say a majority of the population is already level 60, you're not going to be able to find anyone to help you with that type of stuff. This wouldn't be the biggest problem if travel didn't take too long. Like I can handle getting one shot by a certain mob if I can get back to the area quickly and try to complete the quest again, but travel in this game takes a ridiculous amount of time. Absolutely absurd. There's no mounts, and the world isn't huge, but it's large. It'll take you a sizable amount of time to walk from one settlement to another. There is a fast travel system. You get this resource called Azoth from killing enemies, harvesting materials with specific types of tools, and as well as these things called corrupted portals. Corrupted portals are just world events that you will see a lot of playing this game, And the rewards are pretty solid. In the early game, it drops some okay gear, as well as giving a decent amount of XP. Once you have a good amount of Azoth and you start traveling, the world is very beautiful at first. And then you start traveling to different areas and start noticing all the reused assets and the samey dungeons, world areas. It all feels reused after a certain point until you get to the later game, the end game areas. Great Cleave, Ebonscale Reach, and Eden Grove are super unique by themselves, and you don't really get to see these areas till post level 50. And it's really sad because you can see a lot of like inspiration went into these areas and a lot of hard work, and they're really not used for that long in the game. You can basically avoid Ebonscale up until the final quest in the game. The early game dungeons are good for the most part. They look good, they make you feel immersed for sure. It's really just basic dungeons that you would expect from any other MMO. If you played ESO, you'll feel right at home. It's just basic puzzles, essentially. The boss fights at the end of these dungeons are good when you experience them for the first time, but as you get later on into the game, you start to notice that a lot of these enemy types, a lot of these bosses are going to be reused, especially in elite areas and the end game dungeons. As you'll play, you'll come across areas where enemies will start to have gold borders around their name. These are most of the time elite areas. It could be dungeon enemies as well. There's multiple enemies that can have this border, but most of the time it'll be in your elite zones. And these elite zones have special chests and special mini bosses. They drop pretty good loot, but as you get towards the end game elite zones, this becomes your main way to grind what is called Watermark. Now, Watermark is a system that a lot of people are not a fan of. Personally, I think it's terrible. So what it does, you basically have to kill enemies over and over of level 63 or above. And what this will do is it'll give you a random chance for that enemy to drop a piece of gear that will increase the gear score of the item. Gear score is your main gear level, and it's almost essential to grind this in the end game unless you make a lot of money and you're able to buy gear. But it really just forces you to play the same content. It wouldn't be too bad if there wasn't only two endgame dungeons and I don't know, three elite areas where you can increase watermark. It makes endgame really boring essentially, and I think this is where a lot of players quit playing the game because you just put almost 200 hours to get to level 60 and get your build together, and now you need to do it all over again. And probably it's going to take you even longer. To a lot of players, gear score is very important, especially in an MMO. It makes you feel like you're making progress and just improving your character, but with the watermark system, it's so slow and it's all up to random chance. It doesn't feel very rewarding. If you're simply going for PvE content, it's not the worst thing in the world. You won't really notice that big of a difference between, say, a 500 gear score item and a 550. But once you get into PvP, it starts to become really apparent that you are behind. Once you hit level 60, you unlock a game mode called Outpost Rush, and it's fun. This is probably going to be players' first experience in like the large scale PvP of the game because getting in the wars is very difficult, especially on the higher population servers because they are just going to use all their company. Playing Outpost Rush or getting into a war with a group of friends is a great time. Solo, it's still fun to do, but definitely not as enjoyable as if you have a good group of people around you. Outpost Rush is essentially, if you've ever played Domination in Call of Duty, it's essentially that, just 20v20. Wars are fun as well, but Most of the time, you're probably going to be listening to another player who was given charge over a certain war or whatnot. So, for a war to begin, an area needs to be thrown into conflict. And this is done by completing PvP quests, which are another grind in the game that's good for XP. It's really good for money if you do them every day. Upon completion of these quests, if your faction does not own that territory, the territory standing will increase. And once this hits 100%, an area is thrown into conflict, and a company can declare war on it. PvP quests are pretty fun until you're done with the first 3 runs, and then it gets very repetitive very fast, as it's the only way to really increase standing in an area efficiently, and that's probably one of the main things the game wants you to do is control other territories. It's not a very fleshed out system. It's go to this area, cut down trees, kill wolves. It's the same quest you've been doing all game, now with just slightly different rewards. But overall, when I'm playing Outpost Rush or I'm in a war, I do tend to enjoy myself. The class system feels pretty balanced. Sometimes there's bugs where that'll just make one class infinitely better, but once they balance everything and they patch all the bugs out, it feels good. The PvP is fun. It's definitely my most enjoyable part of the game. Other than that, there's not much more to say when it comes to me. I didn't really level any of my crafting skills. That doesn't really appeal to me as a player, so I never really bothered with it. I have heard from friends and other guild members that the crafting grind is ridiculous. It's very time consuming, and if something you want to do is become a max level crafter, it's going to take you a long time. I will say there's a lot of problems with this game, especially when it comes to progression, but the PvP for me keeps me hooked, it keeps me playing. I really do enjoy it. I think it's a good time, especially if you can find some friends along the way. It's worth every minute of it. However, I wouldn't recommend purchasing this game if you aren't fond of bugs, you're not willing to work with Amazon throughout the development process. This game feels early access at times. There's a lot of bugs, a lot. And sometimes they take a very long time to respond and fix these problems. Overall, I enjoy New World. I don't really know if I can recommend it to people. I've never played RuneScape, but I've seen a lot of comparisons drawn to it. So if you're looking for a more updated, simpler version of RuneScape, I'd definitely recommend you play this, at least try it out. I really hope Amazon continues to develop and work on this game. It's definitely a very good framework. I enjoy most of the loops besides Watermark, but I'm sure as the game matures and advances, this will all be improved upon, I hope. That's really all I have to say. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, I appreciate all of it.